Hello and welcome to The Future Is Now, a Forbes show of the digital TV channel F15. I am Camilla Sievers, entrepreneur and under 30 list maker, and on my show you will meet future builders, changing their industries and building utopias in their respective fields. Today's guest is Jack Smith. He is a serial entrepreneur and investor. He has invested in over 100 startups and advises just as many. And he's originally from the UK, moved to San Francisco in 2011 with his startup called Vungle, where he incubated at AngelList. And then years later, sold his startup to Blackstone for $770 million. He is a jack of all trade, no pun intended. He is only 31, but has nearly 20 years of experience, starting his first startup at the age of 13. So we will talk about his life today, all the lessons that he learned and the tips that he can give, and also how he envisions different futures. As this interview was so vast, we decided to cut it in two parts. So this is part one. And part one will deal with his last 13 years, how he turned insecurities into successes, if hustling ever gets easier, what was the secret sauce to the success that led him where he is today, how it's different to be a founder versus an investor, how this mental shift occurred in his life when he decided to not do startups anymore, but advise them and invest in them, and how to find the hidden gems that he now pushes forward in his endeavor to make the world better. There's also going to be a Dogecoin story that you shouldn't miss. So let's welcome him to the show. Hi, Jack. So nice of you to join us and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You are originally from the UK and you moved to the US roughly 10 years ago with your startup called Vango. But overall, I would say we will be talking about your life journey because you have been a serial entrepreneur since the age of 13. You have managed to build multiple companies, some of which have had evaluation north of $250 million. You've seen it all. You've been to one of the best incubators in the world. You've raised lots of money and you've sold a company for $770 million. And now you describe yourself as an ex-entrepreneur and you focus on building up other startups, advising them. You are a board member of various organizations. Also, you have you do charitable work. So I just want to dig into your life and talk about the future of entrepreneurship, the future of entrepreneurs, the future of startups. Before we do that, I would like with three questions. And the first one would be, tell us what's your biggest strength and your biggest weakness.
So I was thinking that actually probably my biggest strength and biggest weakness might be the same thing, which is biggest kind of weakness, but also an advantage is like easily distracted, and that I do procrastinate a lot and not like focus on one thing. So obviously that's a weakness in terms of if you ask someone else, they might just be like, oh, Jack's distracted all the time and not working on stuff. But actually that is and it's been a great advantage to me in how I found breakthrough opportunities. Because if you think about it, if you're just in the rat race too much, just focusing on your day job and somebody's telling you, right, this is what you need to do, and you only do that, then you're kind of just heads down on what you're doing. And then you're not seeing what's going on around you. And so for me, I've noticed like lots of opportunities, perhaps when I was procrastinating from what I was supposed to be working on. So like, oh, there was something I was supposed to be doing, but then I got bored. And then so maybe I was just browsing the internet and then just discovered these life-changing massive opportunities by being distracted. So I think that is a weakness and strength, that I'm interested in always learning and kind of browsing and consuming and observing lots of stuff.
Amazing. I think many people can relate to this. So what's your life philosophy?
I think always kind of evolving and improving, but I guess life philosophy, for me, one of the main bits that I'm always focusing on is just optimizing for happiness. And I think don't always get there, but that is one of the things that I think should be at the forefront, because if you're doing things that are making you unhappy or are not fulfilling to you, then maybe you should take a step back and think about why are you doing it? Because if you're just doing stuff and your idea is that it'll, in the very, very long term, come to happiness, but if you look at it right now today, it's actually taking away happiness from you, then perhaps that's not the best thing for you.
Yeah, totally. What's your work philosophy?
For me, it's evolved over time. So when I was in my 20s and starting my different startups, I was just all in on my work, and so sacrificed all the other areas of my life, like health, friendship, relationships, etc. Like I was just all in on work. And then nowadays, the projects that I'm working on for work is more just that they are secondary to my life balance and are just things that I'm trying to build where it doesn't require so much of my time. But that I think is just some a different stage of life right now, because I think at different stages of your life, different things can be more fulfilling to you, and you can sacrifice different things at different stages of your life. Even though I was when I was doing startups, that I sacrificed my health and friendships and stuff, it still was extremely fulfilling to have this thing that you're working on that is really you're having a big goal, and so you're getting a lot out of it. But that maybe is very draining to do that for 10 plus years, you know. So I think at different points in your life, you might prioritize different things.
And sticking with this, would you say it was the success that made you realize that something else also mattered because you've achieved your goal that you maybe set for the decade? Or what was the switch that went off that told you, hang on, I think I have to reprioritize my life?
Yeah, I think I didn't necessarily set goals before, but I think that many of the best entrepreneurs kind of have a chip on their shoulder, like something to prove or something driving them. And then for me, I think that it was, as you said, because I'd started different companies when I was like 13 and 15, I felt that people weren't really taking me seriously back then. Probably rightfully, because I was just didn't know what the hell I'm doing. But I kind of felt like, hey, people are not taking me seriously, so I need to prove myself so they'll take me seriously. And then more recently, then now that I'd sold my company and stuff, then I kind of felt through, all right, what is like driving me now? And I didn't have the same drive that, oh, I need to prove people wrong or need to build a big company for X, Y, and Z reason. And I think just felt more comfortable with myself, that I just thought about, all right, what is going to motivate me now? And maybe it's more impactful things like charitable things versus just trying to make more money. So yeah, I think it was overcoming some of those insecurities or whatnot that can be beneficial when they're driving you towards something. But then if you kind of meet them a bit, then maybe they're not as strong drivers anymore.
So looking back, would you call them insecurities, or would you call them burners to the flame that was your life journey? What would you tell your 13-year-old self in this moment?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both, like insecurities and driving myself, you know. I can't really think what I would tell myself, because ultimately I figured it out just by seeking it, you know. So I don't know what advice really could have been given. And in many ways, if I think about myself now, I probably would not want to be competing with myself as a 15-year-old, you know, because as a 15-year-old, I'm going to be way more hungry than I am now. I think probably my 15-year-old self as a business person could probably beat me doing many businesses now, because I'm just, as 15, just going to be all in on that, just like sleep in the office, and just, you know, it's hard to compete with that level of drive. So probably it might be my younger self should be giving my older self advice, not the other way around.
But talking about drive, I looked at your LinkedIn profile, and the thing that I found very interesting is that you list one skill, which is hustling, and it's backed by many people, as everybody can look up to. So would you say that hustling is still at the core of what you do, even now you might have shifted into a different field? Or would you say you don't have to hustle as hard because you also figured out how to streamline processes and have evolved since you were 15? How do you perceive that now?
So basically, I'd never heard of hustle and hustling like before I moved to America. So I had never heard of this. But then when we arrived to America, then people kind of, because we were really hungry and just like trying everything out and trying to work really hard for stuff, then people told us like, oh, you guys are crazy, like hustlers, whatever. And we kind of just embraced that philosophy and just kind of used it for like branding, I guess. So like in the media and stuff, we just kind of pushed this angle. I guess it's just kind of like, if you want people to have one takeaway from you, from observing you, that is kind of the word that we just kind of owned and tried to epitomize. And yeah, maybe nowadays is a bit different in terms of, I guess, when you're just getting started and you don't have the same resources. So basically we didn't have, when we were just starting our company, we didn't have any money. We were more in like debt, like credit card debt and stuff. Like we didn't have resources, and so had to be more innovative in terms of pushing through and getting opportunities that people would describe as like hustling to get opportunities when we didn't have the capital means to get them. Now maybe, yes, it is a bit adjusted, because sometimes it's maybe not necessary now to, you know, work as hard to get those breakthroughs, because now that I do have the means of capital, maybe it is sometimes easier to just pay for something and get it faster, less effort, etc. So I think is a balance. Like with some of the non-profit charitable things that I've been starting now, there maybe could be some like hustling things that I could do, like do it all myself and break through stuff. But then at the same time, it's like, okay, I have capital. This is an area that I'm passionate about. Maybe it would just be faster to just pay some people to do some things to speed it up.
Sure. Well, I guess you know, fruits of labor is what you're reading in now. But this you said something very interesting just now, which is, if you don't have the means, you have to be innovative in getting them. And I think this has been a very important and also transformative part of your own entrepreneurial journey. You went into an incubator called AngelList, and you hacked yourself into this incubator by basically bombarding the CEO with LinkedIn messages from friends that said he definitely should take you guys. Which was 2011. So
yeah, so we managed to basically, just by playing around with LinkedIn, I managed to discover a way to kind of hack their advertising system to be able to create targeted advertisements that I could create an ad targeting down to an individual person. And then I also found a way to kind of bypass their moderation. So then their advertisement had a picture of his face on it, which kind of was not supposed to be approved, but I found a way to kind of get around that. So then very attention grabbing if you're browsing LinkedIn and somebody's advertising, targeting you with your own face, you know?
Yeah. And so if you look back, would you say this kind of hustling mentality, thinking outside the box, thinking about new ideas, how to move things forward. Now, as an investor, investing into startups and giving startups the means to might not be so innovative because they can acquire knowledge or services or whatever. Yeah, has that own experience shaped how you invest now?
Yeah, and I mean, I think also actually when you've done, so for me, that because I've done a few different startups now, and then I'd helped advise different ones and invested in some, and so you get to see a lot of different companies and how they approach stuff. You know, when I was just starting my company first off, I didn't have that benefit of seeing how everyone else is doing it, so kind of didn't have a playbook to follow. So we were kind of just figuring stuff out as we went along. I think actually, I think now in my position that you can kind of get this like investor paralysis, which is because you're seeing so many data points, you kind of see more reasons why something might not work. You know, like because you're like, oh, all these other companies tried it and it didn't work. So this idea, you shouldn't do this idea, it's probably not going to work. But then when I was just doing my startup myself, I didn't have all that benefit of seeing everything else. So we didn't know if someone else had already tried this or not. We didn't know the rules, basically, and we didn't have the pattern recognition. And so maybe you're more likely to just pursue something and push through it, versus now I might be more skeptical in assessing ideas because I'm like, oh, I've seen like 10 other guys doing this and it didn't work for this reason. So then I'm going to be biased that this person pursuing it is not going to work out because I've seen these other 10 people that already tried it and it didn't work. So I think there's pros and cons. There's benefit to naivety in some ways.
Looking at two startups that you founded, one called Vango, which is the leader of mobile advertising and monetization. And just for the viewers, you started this in 2011 when the App Store was basically brand new.
Yeah.
And you thought about, why don't we put ads in apps? So a very, I would say, innovative way of looking what's out there and then grasping opportunities. Then you did another startup, which you scaled to, I believe, 250 plus million valuation, called Shyp. So comparing those two startups, if they can be compared, what made the one startup be scalable to an evaluation? You sold it for 770 million, which was Vango, versus Shyp, which went from 250 million to a zero evaluation.
I think it's very different. And then also that Vungle was more B2B type company and able to generate revenue from day one. And then with Shyp, it also wasn't my idea. I was joining these two other guys who had already come up with the idea to help them start it. And that was more of a consumer business. And I think that they were just grown in very different ways and also judged in very different ways. That Shyp took more of like the Uber type approach, where basically, I don't know the latest, but you know, for a long, long time, Uber was not profitable. It was losing money and had to be propped up by the VC investment, so needed a lot of investment. However, they have built a really massive business, Uber, and I could definitely see how it could be a very profitable long-term business. And that was the route that Shyp also tried to follow, which is a high growth consumer route where it's not really profitable. And, you know, sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. It's kind of just a very big bet. Whereas for Vungle, it was able to be profitable very early on because advertising, there's lots of money in advertising, and we weren't using investor money to subsidize anything. All of the deals we were doing made us money. We did raise some investment, relatively small versus Shyp and some other businesses. But that investment was more for like hiring and stuff. And actually the Series B at Vungle that we raised, we didn't even spend any of the money ever. We actually could have built the entire Vungle business maybe with less than $9 or so million. We raised the Series B kind of as a buffer, but it turned out that we never actually needed it because the business was able to generate so much money itself. Just the industry was so large.
Wow, that is cool. So what would be your main takeaways on how you scout these startups that you want to invest in, that you want to advise, and that you want to spend your time with?
I think it's a bit of both, but especially now with coronavirus, that everything's remote. I think the power of Silicon Valley is becoming minimized a lot more. And then I also spoke to somebody.
Just tell me what you mean by that. I find that very interesting. Quick.
Like the Bay Area, a lot of the people that I know living in San Francisco are leaving. They're leaving because everything's going towards remote work. So, and San Francisco has become extremely, it's an expensive place to live. And then it's also like a lot, it's not necessarily super pleasant. It's kind of got quite unpleasant as a living environment in the past 10 years. Like there is huge amounts of kind of drug addicts on the street and mental illness and lots of challenges that they're having. And the coronavirus environment has also exacerbated that, like deaths from drug overdoses kind of doubled in the past year. And so it's not necessarily the most pleasant place to live long term, especially not to be locked up in a smaller apartment with lockdown restrictions and stuff. And so a lot of people have actually been leaving and moving to places like Miami or Austin in Texas. And so I think the power of being in Silicon Valley is becoming a lot less because startups are being spread out all over now. They're not only in San Francisco. Okay.
Coming back to my question beforehand, what are the key ingredients, the takeaways on how you scout startups? How do you find the next future unicorn?
Yes, I mean, to pick up on the point that you were saying as well, that you were like, oh, do you think you get better opportunities now if you've had a few successes and stuff? I was actually speaking to somebody who he previously worked at a top tier venture capital firm, like one of the very best in Silicon Valley. And then he said that they kind of created an environment where they made the people that are working there as investors, they made them feel like, hey, you're only seeing all of these amazing startups because we have such a strong brand that we're like a top tier VC firm. Like if you leave and try and do this by yourself, then you won't get to see good companies. You know, they were kind of using that as a mechanism to keep them there. But then once he left, he said that he found that he still was able to see cool companies and that he did it. And maybe the brand attracting of the top tier VC firm was not as strong as they were kind of presenting it. And for me, I think that, having a network and stuff, like I do meet companies where other people like introduce them to me and things like that. And that's definitely helpful. But other companies that I've been involved with, I'd also just kind of scouted out myself and been able to get access to them, maybe not through other connections. So with the Shyp startup, the way that I originally found those guys is that I was just browsing Hacker News, which is this website. It's a bit like Reddit, but it's more focused on like the Silicon Valley scene. And not even on the homepage, maybe on like the second page. They also have this section called like Show Hacker News, where it's basically people that are just like starting up ideas and they're just sharing, hey, here's what we're working on. And I saw these guys saying their idea for the shipping business. And I just reached out to them and I was like, hey, your idea looks interesting. Let me know if you just want help running through your pitch deck or something like that. And then I met up with them and then we just got on really well. And then they asked me, hey, do you want to join as a co-founder? And I think bits like that, you know, anyone could find something like that if they put in the effort and then just reach out. There's nothing stopping you reaching out. Actually, people kind of highlighted that like Dropbox first started as well as a Hacker News project, and so did Coinbase. These entrepreneurs, they actually tried, I think Coinbase, he tried out like 10 different ideas that he posted on Hacker News. He was like, oh, what about this like Bitcoin wallet for Android? And then what about this other idea? So he was building, it's not like you could only discover that business if you worked at Sequoia or a top tier VC fund. If you were just browsing the internet and browsing Hacker News, you would see this. But the thing is that many people seeing it just wrote it off. So it's also, you can see the original post of Coinbase that he posts like, hey, here's this idea I'm working on. And people are like, this is not needed. Or Dropbox, he posted, and people were like, we already have USB sticks. Why do we need this Dropbox thing? They were like, you're not solving a problem, And so massive businesses can often look like a joke at the early stage. And just if you looked through that and if you found it interesting, you could have just reached out to him and you could have become his co-founder, or you could have helped him out in some way. It's also, if you see an opportunity that looks interesting, you don't need to see a clear path about what's in it for me. You don't need to be just taking. You could just reach out to him and be like, hey, your idea is really awesome. I'd love to just help you any way that I can. And then you can see where it goes. With the Shyp business, I wasn't reaching out to them to try and become their co-founder. I wasn't reaching out to them to try and get anything. I was reaching out because I was like, hey, this idea looks cool. I've built some pitch decks because I've done the startup before now and stuff. So if I can be helpful to you anyway, like help you with your pitch deck or help you with anything, I'd love to be helpful just because the idea looks cool. And if you just approach things like that, where you're not trying to do an exact path, you're just open to serendipity and like, let's just see where this takes me. And if you're approaching it in a good natured manner about, I just want to be helpful, then you can just see where that takes you,
Would you say, looking at the future of scouting and the future of VC investments, that will be coming up more and more versus the typical VC funds that, have teams that scout every day, have their brands, their marketing in place, and their network effects, but also the software that scouts these kinds of platforms for information? Or would you say that technology will not so much further this along, but the human factor, like you taking the time, reading these kinds of entries or posts, and then reaching out and, without anything, maybe not with a direct return on investment in mind, is the future of many people that will make money in the future and wanting to invest in young companies. That should be their approach, and that's how they should do it.
I think it's different for different stages. I think that if a company, if we're looking at Series B or later stage, then definitely I think having the team and maybe the technology to look at the numbers and see how is this company doing relative to other companies at that stage and stuff. And you're at that stage, maybe a VC firm is able to sit back more and the companies might just approach them a bit, just pitching everyone. At the early stage, I think it might actually go more towards the human element, because companies also are starting to just see that the fundraising process is very inefficient. I have to have all of these Zoom calls or in-person meetings and pitch loads of people and reach out to loads of people. And it's a long process. And so I think that people now are just preferring like, hey, if I can just somewhere where I can get a quick check. I think that's why things like AngelList syndicates are taking off, because these AngelList guys are like, hey, look, I can bring you $200,000 or something, and I don't have all the bureaucracy of a VC fund. Then founders are like, oh yeah, that's much more efficient, faster for my time, and these guys are more friendly. And so I think that if someone is at the early stage, then yeah, you can find cool opportunities just from that human element and being interested and looking at discovering new stuff. But then it's looking where other people are not really looking, because they're, as you said, these VC funds, they have teams to scout, but they're just doing, a lot of the times what they're doing is just like lazy scouting. So there was this person on Twitter that was just joking. He's like, hey, if you want to get loads of investors pinging you, then just change your Twitter bio to say working on something new. And then like all these people, all these investors will try and reach out to you to, they're like, oh, what's he working on or she working on, you know? That's just pretty lazy, you know? Other ways that you could do it is just like looking where other people are not looking. So that means that maybe some new platform has just started and no one's really using it. And it looks like a joke, that it looks like this is not going to go anywhere. It looks like a joke. Actually, a lot of the biggest projects are engineers just playing around, doing experiments and doing stuff for fun. So that could be where the next big thing is. I was just looking back over an email this morning, and it was actually from this investor guy I know, and he was just exploring the NFT space a while back. And then we were both like, don't really understand what's going on here or where it's going. And it kind of looked like a joke at the time, still kind of looks like a joke in some ways, but he just got in at a perfect time, because he was like, hey, what's this thing that looks kind of weird and other people are not really looking at it that much? And at the time, it was mainly just people deep into crypto and engineers that were experimenting. And so that is an example of him finding a breakthrough thing. It was checking it out when other people are not talking about it. You know, now if you're like, oh, I'm going to invest in NFT stuff and I'm going to start now, you're like massively behind everyone else and probably could just lose a bunch of money because you just invest in something that's really overpriced. Versus back then, when it was like a joke, you could see cool opportunities. I was actually remembering as well, like a few Christmases ago, I think maybe 4 years ago, I just bought my brother for Christmas. So my family were not into crypto, but I bought my parents and one of my brothers just like $10 worth or $100 worth of Bitcoin and gave it to them on USB stick. And then I bought my other brother like $10 or $100 worth of Dogecoin as a joke. And then so I was like, and then he was actually really upset at the time because he's like, oh wait, why did they get Bitcoin and then I get this like crappy joke dog on a coin? And then he actually lost the USB stick. And then I told him now, I'm like, no. Hey man, you know, it's up like 15,000% or 30,000% since I got you that. So that
has he found it? Has he found it?
I don't know if he's found it. I mean, so I mean, it's not going to be millions of dollars, even if it is. I mean, it would probably be, let's say $10 has probably become 15,000. So still a big sum of money for him, but not as probably if it was now worth $1 million, then probably he'd be a lot more upset. But yeah, it's just kind of interesting that stuff that looks like a joke, if you wait a little bit, can be very big.
I might ask a controversial question here. Mm-hmm. At the time when you were buying Bitcoin for one part of the family and Dogecoin for another part of the family, was the Dogecoin meant as a joke, or were you again seeing maybe an opportunity that other people didn't see? Because at the end of the day, it is a coin that is definitely, just in terms of usage, not as useful as Bitcoin. And
yeah, it has no use. That's the point.
No use, exactly.
Yeah, I was buying it as a joke. I wasn't buying it because I thought it was going to be massive. But basically what I was trying to do is that just kind of introduce my family to crypto. So basically I just bought them the Ledger, which is like, it's kind of a secure USB device where you store your token. And so I was just buying each of them some coin just to introduce them to the concept of crypto. I was mainly buying them the USB stick thing as a gift because that was like $100 and it was just a secure way to store your crypto. So I was just mainly buying it for the USB thing, and I just loaded it with $10 of the Dogecoin was a joke, just to have something that he could have to start with it. And I think that Dogecoin is still a joke and it doesn't have any utility at all. However, that's just an example of, it could have evolved into having some utility, like it hasn't. It still is a joke, but it has a lot of, it is valued at a lot now because just like people have ran with the joke and they find it really funny. But that can happen sometimes where something looks like a joke, you don't get it, but then it maybe evolves into something, or you get it later on after the fact,
And here's the big question. Would you look at a person, say, spend $1,000 on Dogecoin while back, as a joke, a dumb person who does not invest, who doesn't know where to invest $1,000, or a mastermind who's like, well, people have behaved in a certain way, kind of like always, so my bet is on they will behave like this again, even with a joke coin, and hence I will make a lot of money.
I think it's a balance. So I think if you're just spending beyond your means, if you're being reckless and like, I'm going to put all of my money into this really risky thing, then maybe that's not the super best idea. Like a lot of people did lose money with GameStop at certain points, So I think that it's about not spending more than you can afford to lose. However, if you've got some discretionary money that you would like to put in a place that seems risky, then I don't think that I or anyone else, no matter how experienced they are, even like Warren Buffett, I don't think that anyone can judge you and say that you are stupid, because that is actually just a very easy and disrespectful and quickly dismissive thing that people with experience do. Like, oh, this person is really stupid. And then that's why they push for like, oh, there should be laws to protect this person. That person is not legally allowed to invest in startups. They don't have starting to change it because they're like, oh, it's too risky and that person is too inexperienced. And basically they're just saying that person is dumb. They're like, that person is dumb and we need laws to protect them from themselves. And it's like, okay, well, you make it legal for them to buy a lottery ticket, but they're not allowed to choose to spend it on investing in a startup instead if they want. The odds are probably way better investing in the startup than investing in the freaking lottery. So I think that dismissing something as stupid is just a way that people actually build control, and they centralize things themselves because they're like, oh, that's too risky and you're too stupid, so just give your money to me and I'll manage it, because they're basically reinforcing their own job, like validating themselves. Like, oh yeah, I need to be managing the money because I've studied it all and I have a PhD in this and whatever. If you look at the endowments like Harvard, Stanford, these are like billion dollar endowments. Their returns often suck. Like they're underperforming just putting money in the S&P 500. Like a monkey throwing darts at a dartboard could get better returns than them, but they need to make up this stuff that like, oh, investing is like really complicated and everyone else needs to be protected and this proprietary knowledge to make sure they have a job. That's kind of the way I see it. For myself personally, I can remember like, I think 6 or so years ago, I went to this person who had a family office. And he was building the family office in site. He had a company that he built to a couple of hundred employees, or tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. And he started a family office in kind of a back room of his own company. And his family office was that he basically just hired, his son was at university. He just hired friends of his son and was like, hey, just invest this money however you think could be good. And basically I was touring their office and they showed me their like crypto mining rig that the guys have built. And at the time, I'll admit, at the time, I was thinking like, this guy is a bit wacky or a bit stupid. Like, why is he giving, why is he having his family office run by these 18-year-olds? You know, it seemed a stupid idea. When I can look back, I think that he did a great job. He must have had amazing returns, that he had these teenagers just experimenting with stuff, and they were building crypto mining rigs when it was not cool, probably made way better returns than someone who just built a traditional family office. And so for him, I think it comes back to what I was saying before. He was not entirely reckless, because basically what he did is he just had an experimental budget. So basically he had some money managed with Goldman Sachs, like, you know, very low risk. And he just told the guy like, hey, just invest me in safe stuff and just don't lose my money. And then he had some part of his money, I don't know how much, that he gave to these 18-year-olds to experiment with. And that, I think, is a good strategy. Like, you're not saying like, hey, I've made $100 million by working really hard, and now I'm going to give the entire $100 million to my son's friend, because that would be very reckless. And if he lost all that money, would probably be very upset. Instead, he's like, hey, I've made some money, and now I'm going to do some of it in safe stuff, and some of it I'm going to do experimental stuff. And that paid off for him and seems to make sense for me.
This concludes the first part of the interview with Jack Smith. Next week, we will air the second part, and we would love for you to join us again. See you next week.